Now we have Evan Mulholland, who is the Media and Communications Director for the Institute of Public Affairs, or the IPA, and former advisor to the Turnbull and Abbott governments. So let's give him a round of applause.
Thanks, everyone. Unfortunately, I don't have a PowerPoint, but thanks for having me speak at this careers panel, and hopefully I want to sort of divide it into three parts. How I got to where I am at the moment, what I actually do, and how you can get involved as well. So I started sort of getting involved in the political sphere at university, much like everyone else does. I joined the Liberal Club at university, which is the thing you do when you're of the centre right and that way of thinking. So I got involved in a lot in the Liberal Party. And don't know what your views on the Liberal Party. People have different views on the Liberal Party, but I got involved in the Liberal Party, student politics, and the Liberal Club at La Trobe University. Now, if you've heard of La Trobe University in Bundoora, it's commonly and historically known as La Trot, because it is one of the most left-wing universities in Australia, if not the most left-wing universities in Australia. So I went through a lot of arguing with lecturers and tutors and classmates and whatnot. You would have seen historically there's been lots and lots of protests by the socialists. I ended up becoming president of the La Trobe University Liberal Club, and only through setting up a stall will have tables flipped over by socialists just because you are of the centre right. What got me thinking more about liberty and libertarianism and classical liberalism and its ideas was upon the invitation of Tim Andrews, I hosted Tom Palmer to La Trobe University. Tom Palmer's a libertarian author, a very good one at that. He works at Cato, and he gave a lecture on the morality of capitalism. And I invited all a lot of my left-wing classmates and lecturers and whatnot, and he gave a talk on the morality of capitalism. I recommend you read his book as well on that. But it shows in terms of the university system how biased it is, and the need to push back against that. I ended up becoming president of the Australian Liberal Students Federation, which is the peak body for all sort of liberal clubs in Australia, and got thinking about activism, how to push back against the left. We did a lot of campaigns on the Student Services Amenities Fee, which is a student tax. We, of course, support voluntary student unionism. Also started a campaign on removing parallel import restrictions on books, which is a very dear issue to my heart. We have basically a tariff which allows multinationals to gouge our market, and it makes textbooks much more expensive in Australia to protect the publishing industry at the expense of consumers. So it's taking a centre-right argument and expressing that to students, and we actually had some success. It's now government policy to remove that. I ended up obviously finishing university, and I ended up working in government. So I worked in opposition and government for Mitch Fifield, who's now the communications minister. And worked in opposition and campaigned to get us into government, and then worked as a policy and media advisor in both the Abbott and Turnbull governments. I found that it's not only the left at university you have to fight against, it's the left in the public service. So I would get a lot of briefs coming up from the department, whether it would have been aged care and social services to communications, where they'd put up a brief to you, and it would have, we want to spend millions of dollars on this new program. And they'd give us like three options. They'd be like, this is the best thing that we want, this is a moderate version of what we want, and this is like the bare minimum. And one of the things we did with my influence is that we added a new item at the end. What would be the outcome if we did nothing? And often we would tick the last box that they added in to do absolutely nothing, because every day they're putting up new spending items to ministers, and often ministers will just, like, literally, this is what happened under the Labor government, would literally just tick off every policy, put out a media release, and we'd have more and more government. And so hopefully, in a way, I helped contribute to the pushback against that. The government can often be a depressing place. You're putting, I worked a bit as a Senate advisor, and you're putting through bills like direct action and the e-safety commissioner and all sorts of other bills that infringe upon our liberties and our beliefs. But I also worked as a media advisor, and I found the left again entrenched in a thing called the Canberra Press Gallery. Now, the Canberra Press Gallery is a weird beast. So you've got a small minority make up the majority of audience. So you've got your Herald Suns, your Daily Telegraph, your Australian, and 7 News and 9 News, which have the most audience base. But then you've got all these microcosms that create a groupthink in the Canberra Press Gallery. So you've got Guardian, BuzzFeed, The Age, Sydney Morning Herald, Financial Review, Huffington Post. You've got all these left-wing media outlets, and it creates a groupthink in the press gallery, which I think is a bit of a disease. And fighting back against that and sort of leftist ideals where all the solutions that they can come up with and cheer on is new taxes. So after a while, I thought 3.5 years of being in government was enough. And about May last year, I moved along to the Institute of Public Affairs to become their Media and Communications Manager. I love my job at the moment. It's quite good. So I disseminate, or if you don't know of the Institute of Public Affairs, you should definitely join. We're Australia's oldest free market think tank, fight for all causes of liberty and small government and free markets. I've had a lot to do on the free speech debate recently and a lot of other issues on the economic front. But what I do is I disseminate our research, write our press releases, and get our research out there in an aggressive way. So we'll use my contacts that I made in Canberra to drop to journalists and be on the phone to journalists, giving comments, and really being aggressive in what we do. We were quoted almost daily during the 18C debate, and that was because we didn't just wait for media to come to us on the issue. We pushed it out and created our own media. We did polling, so we did several pollings to do with both the QUT case and removing offend and insult from the Act itself. And all the polling we did came back very good. We would drop it to the Australian. We would do lots and lots of media that day. I don't know if you would know Simon Brainey, our policy director, was definitely on the forefront of that debate, as well as our executive director, John Roscombe. We would also harass the Human Rights Commission with weekly FOIs on their activities and what they're doing. And it actually highlighted a lot of the cases that were brought out in the media and borne out in the media, where there was also the Human Rights Inquiry, where we would put we forensically looked through all of the different groups that had submitted pro-18C causes and found that a majority of them were taxpayer funded, either taxpayer groups and government agencies, as well as the majority of groups that submitted to that were actually taxpayer funded. They received grants and whatnot, and this is how they're sort of using our money. Yeah, a lot of it is being on the forefront, pushing back against sort of leftist journos and writing reports, and this is very important. You'll have a lot of think tanks in Australia, obviously left wing. You've got the Australian Institute, you've got the McKell Institute, you've got the Grattan Institute, you've got a plethora of left wing think tanks, and the IPA is really at the forefront, as well as with the Taxpayers Alliance and people like the Menzies Institute and the Centre for Independent Studies in really pushing back and promoting free markets. And so a lot of the work we're doing at the moment is on red tape and deregulation and getting rid of a lot of the environmental laws we've got at the moment, which hold back development and jobs. And it's a really big issue at the moment. And I think it's the new 18C in a sense that you've got all these green groups that are pushing back mining in Australia when we're the most resource-rich country. Unemployment in Queensland is in some points, youth unemployment is over 20%, and we're holding back development in country for no economic benefit. The IPA did a lot in the climate change debate before my time, but when they were introducing a carbon tax and emissions trading scheme. And it was the IPA that actually was on the forefront saying, well, we don't create any environmental benefit to the rest of the world, so why are we inflicting economic self-harm? I would highly recommend getting involved in the IPA or getting involved in a similar pathway. It's very rewarding. Seeing your work in the newspaper, seeing your work on TV is extremely rewarding. If you're not a member of the IPA already, I recommend going to join.ipa.org.au. We've got a program called Generation Liberty. At most universities, there's or most major universities, there's a Freedom Society. We've got campus coordinators, those campuses, and we often hold regular events for our young members. So I'd highly recommend getting involved and getting involved that way, and getting involved in whatever way you see fit. So thanks for having me.